Liverpool 1944. The city wakes beneath a low iron sky. Smoke drifts lazily above rows of soot-darkened terraces, clinging to the air like a memory that refuses to fade. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn groans along the River Mersey, deep and mournful, echoing through narrow streets still scarred by war. The ground is damp, the bricks are blackened, and yet life, stubborn, defiant life, moves forward. Inside a modest home in the district of Sefton Park, a child is born. His name is Maurice James Christopher Cole. There is nothing, at first glance, remarkable about this moment. No great fanfare, no sense that anything unusual has arrived. Just another boy, in another house, in a city trying to piece itself back together. But outside, the world hums with tension. Britain is still at war. Ration books sit in kitchen drawers, tea is measured, sugar is precious. Every meal carries the quiet arithmetic of survival. The house smells faintly of boiled cabbage and coal smoke. It is a strict home, ordered and watchful. Maurice is raised within the firm boundaries of Irish Catholic discipline, a world of rules, ritual and reverence. There are expectations here, clear ones. You behave, you listen, you obey. And yet, even now, something doesn't quite settle. As Maurice grows, the sounds of the outside world begin to seep in. The wireless crackles in the corner of the room, voices slipping through static, announcers, singers, fragments of faraway places. There is magic in that box. Invisible voices conjured out of thin air. Maurice listens closely, not just to what is said, but to how it is said. The rhythm, the tone, the space between words, he begins to imitate. A voice here, a sound there. Small performances, barely noticeable at first, but they are precise, observed, recreated. It is not just play, it is study. The world, to Maurice, is something that can be replayed, reshaped, and exaggerated. Liverpool itself provides the soundtrack, dock workers shouting across the riverfront, the clatter of trams, the laughter spilling out of pubs late into the night. There is music everywhere, American records arriving through the port, carried across the Atlantic like contraband joy. Even in hardship, the city pulses with rhythm, but inside the home, the tone remains controlled. There is little room for nonsense here. As Maurice enters boyhood, that tension begins to sharpen. He is sent away to a Catholic seminary, a place of silence, of discipline, of expectation. Long corridors echo with footsteps and whispered prayers. The air smells of polish and old wood. Time is structured, rigid, every hour accounted for. This is where he is meant to become something respectable, something proper. But the world inside Maurice is anything but quiet. In the stillness of the seminary, his mind becomes louder. Ideas flicker, voices return, characters begin to take shape, not fully formed, not yet, but present. Waiting. He listens, always listens, to the smallest sounds. A cough echoing down a hallway, the creak of a door, the way a priest's voice changes when he thinks no one is paying attention. And Maurice notices everything. There is a growing sense that he does not belong here, not in this ordered world of certainty, not in a life mapped out in advance. The rules feel too tight, the silence too heavy. Something inside him resists, not loudly, not yet, but persistently. The pressure builds, and then, inevitably, it breaks. Maurice is expelled. The reasons are not grand or dramatic, they rarely are. But the result is final. He is sent back into the world, no longer on the path that had been so carefully chosen for him. The future, once structured and predictable, suddenly opens into something far less certain, but also something far more dangerous, because now there are no clear boundaries, only possibility. Back in Liverpool, the city feels different, wider, louder, full of strange, unpredictable energy. Maurice drifts between moments, home, street, sound, silence. He experiments, plays, listens. The wireless is no longer just entertainment. It is a tool, a doorway. He begins to understand something. That sound can be shaped, that voices can be transformed, that reality itself can be bent. There is no audience yet, no stage, no name beyond Morris Cole. But the foundations are there, quietly assembling, a way of seeing the world that is slightly off-centre, slightly faster, slightly sharper, as if everything is happening just a fraction of a second ahead of everyone else. And in that small gap, something extraordinary is beginning to form. The war will end, Britain will rebuild, the world will move on. But Morris is already tuning into a different frequency, one that few others can hear. For now, he is just a boy in Liverpool, listening, always listening. London, early 1960s. The city feels like it's speeding up. There's a new rhythm in the air, quicker, sharper, impossible to ignore. Music spills out of cafes and passing cars. Young voices talk over each other, full of energy, full of change. London is shedding its old skin, and in its place, something louder is emerging. Moving through it all is Morris Cole. He is watching, listening, always listening. Because somewhere beyond the official voices of British radio, something else is calling. Late at night, the signal crackles in, faint at first, then stronger. Music the BBC won't play. DJs who don't sound like authority figures but like real people. They laugh, they improvise, they make mistakes. Pirate radio, out at sea transmitters beam illegal broadcasts into British homes, unregulated, unpredictable, alive, and Morris is drawn to it. When he finally steps into one of these makeshift studios, everything changes. The room is small, thick with the smell of warm wires and cigarette smoke. Records are piled high, the microphone waits. He leans in, and the moment he speaks, it fits. But Morris Cole is not the voice people will remember. That voice belongs to someone else. Kenny Everett. The name arrives like a spark, lighter, faster, already in motion. And once it's there, it's impossible to separate the two. Kenny doesn't just present music, he plays with it, twists it, interrupts it. His voice shifts mid-sentence, slipping between characters, tones, moods. There is no stillness. Sound effects burst in unexpectedly. Jokes arrive without warning. Songs are chopped, stretched, reshaped. It feels chaotic. But underneath, there is control, timing, precision. Listeners can feel it. They tune in not just for what Kenny will play, but for what he might do next. And soon the outside world begins to take notice. Even the establishment. At BBC Radio 1, a new kind of station is forming. One that tries to capture the energy of pirate radio without losing control. Kenny is brought in, given a platform, a wider audience. But control is the problem, because Kenny doesn't slow down. He pushes, tests the limits, finds the edges and leans over them. His humour becomes sharper, riskier. The same instincts that make him exciting begin to make others nervous. Behind the scenes, tension grows. A joke goes too far. A line is crossed. And suddenly, the microphone is gone. Silence. For a moment, it seems like it might end here. That the system has closed in. That the door is shut. But Kenny Everett is already somewhere else in his mind. Experimenting, building, reshaping sound in ways no one else quite understands yet. Because radio to him is not just a job, it's a playground. And if one door closes, he'll find another frequency. Somewhere, waiting to be discovered. London, mid-1970s. The screen flickers. For years the voice has been enough. Fast, unpredictable, impossible to pin down. But now, something new is happening. The sound is no longer contained. It's breaking out, spilling into light, colour, movement, television. Inside a studio, the air is thick with heat from overhead lights. Cameras sit heavy on their mounts, cables snaking across the floor. Technicians move quickly, quietly. There is a sense of control here, structure, everything timed, measured, rehearsed. And then Kenny Everett walks in, almost immediately. The structure begins to bend, because television, to most, is about what can be seen. To Kenny, it's about what can be done. When the Kenny Everett video show bursts onto screens, it doesn't feel like anything else on British television. It moves too fast, cuts too sharply, jumps between ideas without warning. One moment, a polished musical performance, then suddenly, chaos. A character appears, a joke lands sideways, the scene collapses into something absurd. There is no time to settle, and that's the point. Kenny understands something instinctively, that television doesn't have to behave, that it can be stretched, twisted, broken apart and rebuilt in seconds. Editing becomes part of the comedy. Visuals interrupt the narrative. The audience is pulled forward, never quite sure what's coming next. And then the characters arrive. Cupid Stunt, Sid Snot, figures that are loud, exaggerated, ridiculous, and yet somehow precise. Each one crafted with detail. Voice, movement, timing. They don't just appear. They explode onto the screen, fully formed, demanding attention. Viewers don't forget them. They can't, because Kenny isn't just performing. He's creating a world, one where anything can happen, where logic is optional, and where the only constant is surprise. The country takes notice. Living rooms across Britain begin to fill with laughter that feels slightly different. Faster, sharper, a little more daring. Kenny Everett becomes a household name. Not just a voice anymore, but a presence. Recognisable, unpredictable, everywhere. And yet behind the brightness, something more complicated is taking shape. Because the faster everything moves on screen, the harder it becomes to stay still off it. Fame brings new circles, new faces, music, television, nightlife, all blending together into something constant, something endless. Among them is Freddie Mercury, a kindred spirit in many ways, bold, theatrical, unafraid of spectacle. Their friendship feels natural, two performers who understand the power of transformation, of stepping beyond the ordinary. But even in those moments, laughter, creativity, excess, there is a contrast. On screen, Kenny is in control. Every cut, every sound, every character placed exactly where it needs to be. Off screen, it's less certain. There are expectations now, pressure to be funnier, faster, bigger. The machine keeps moving, and Kenny must move with it, always creating, always performing, always pushing the next idea further than the last. And somewhere in that momentum, the edges begin to show. The jokes get sharper, the energy more frantic. The gaps between the characters, those brief moments of stillness, feel heavier than before. But the audience doesn't see that. They see brilliance. They see colour, noise, invention. A man who seems completely at ease inside the chaos he creates. And for a while, that's enough. Because in this moment, Kenny Everett is at the height of his powers, reinventing what television can be, turning seconds into spectacle, making the impossible feel effortless. But the speed cannot last forever. Even the brightest signals begin to flicker, and beneath the laughter, just for a moment, something quiet awaits, unnoticed, for now. London, early 1980s. The pace begins to change, not suddenly, not all at once, but subtly, like a signal drifting just slightly out of tune. The colours are still bright, the laughter still loud, but something underneath no longer settles the way it once did. Kenny Everett is still a familiar face, still recognisable, still capable of pulling attention the moment he appears. But the world around him is shifting. Television is changing. Audiences are changing. What once felt shocking now feels expected. What once felt new begins to age. And Kenny, always ahead of the curve, now finds himself in a strange position, trying not to fall behind. Off screen, the contradictions begin to surface more clearly. In public, He lends his voice enthusiastically to Margaret Thatcher, a figure of authority, discipline, control, values that echo the structure Kenny once resisted, and yet now in some way seems drawn toward. It surprises people, confuses them. Even those who admire him aren't quite sure how to reconcile it, because at the same time another truth is becoming harder to hide. For years it has existed just beneath the surface, unspoken, carefully managed, pushed aside when necessary. But now the pressure of maintaining that divide begins to take its toll. The performance off screen is becoming harder than the one on it. His marriage begins to fracture. The separation from Lee Middleton is not explosive, not dramatic, but it is final. A quiet acknowledgement that something fundamental no longer holds. And in the space that follows, Kenny becomes more open about who he is. It is not a sudden declaration, more a gradual unveiling. But even that carries weight. Because the world he inhabits, television, media, public life, is not always forgiving, not always understanding. And the contrast between his public image and private reality only deepens the sense of imbalance. On screen, he is still in control, but behind it, things are slipping. There are moments, small at first, where the energy feels different, less focused, less precise. The chaos he once orchestrated so carefully begins to feel less contained. Decisions become harder to predict, appearances more erratic. The line between character and reality blurs, just slightly. People notice, not always openly, not always immediately, but the industry is changing, and it moves quickly. New faces arrive, new styles take hold. The space Kenny once dominated becomes more crowded, more competitive, and for the first time in a long while, he is no longer at the centre of it. Fame doesn't disappear, it fades, gradually, quietly, like a light dimming rather than switching off. The invitations come less often, the opportunities shift, the sense of momentum, the constant forward motion that once defined everything, begins to slow. And in that slowing, something else emerges. Silence. Not the creative kind, not the deliberate pause before a punchline, but a different kind altogether. One that lingers, one that stretches. And in that silence, loneliness begins to grow. Because for all the voices Kenny has created, all the characters, all the noise, there is a part of him that has remained carefully hidden, protected, managed, and now, as the world around him changes, that part becomes harder to ignore. The contradictions remain: public confidence and private uncertainty, laughter and isolation, control and collapse. He has spent years bending reality, reshaping sound and image into something entirely his own. London, late 1980s. The noise begins to fall away, not all at once, not dramatically, just gradually. The bright lights dim, the fast cuts slow. The characters, so loud, so vivid for so long, begin to fade into the background. And in their place, something quieter emerges. Kenny Everett is no longer at the centre of the storm. The world that once moved at his speed has shifted on, finding new rhythms, new voices. But this change is different. This one is not about trends or taste. This one is personal. A diagnosis, HIV. At the time it arrives not just as an illness, but as something heavier, something surrounded by fear, confusion, silence. It is spoken about in lowered voices, if at all. Misunderstood, stigmatized, a word that carries distance with it. And for Kenny, it changes everything. The body, once full of restless energy, begins to slow. Strength fades in ways that cannot be hidden or laughed away. The timing, so precise, so instinctive for so many years, begins to falter. Not in performance, but in life itself. He withdraws. Public appearances become rare. The world he once filled with sound now feels far away, like a broadcast fading at the edge of reception. The studios, the lights, the endless motion, they belong to another time. Now, there is stillness, rooms that are quieter than they used to be, days that stretch longer, moments of reflection that cannot be edited or interrupted. For someone who built a life on noise, on invention, on constant movement, the silence is unfamiliar, but it is also honest. Because in this space, there are no characters, no disguises, just the man himself. Friends remain, some from the past, some who understand the weight of what is happening. But the world outside is still catching up, still learning how to speak about this illness, without fear, without judgment. Time moves forward, slowly, inevitably. And on April 4th, 1995, at the age of 50, Kenny Everett dies. There is no punchline, no final twist, just an ending. For a moment it feels quiet, as though the signal has finally gone. But then, something begins to happen. Gradually people start to look back, to listen again, to watch those old recordings with fresh eyes, and what once felt chaotic, unpredictable, almost reckless, begins to reveal something else. Craft, precision, innovation. Because Kenny Everett was never just being silly. He was building something new, the rapid cuts, the layered sound, the sudden shifts in tone and character. These were not accidents, they were ideas. Modern radio, fast-paced television, sketch comedy that jumps between worlds in seconds. All of it carries echoes of what Kenny was doing years earlier. Quiet influences, woven into the fabric of entertainment. His legacy doesn't shout, it lingers.